GoForTheTruth.com in with the Week 11 predictions for the college football season. Let's jump right into it. It's rivalry weekend with some great games on tap from every conference starting at 12 o'clock. But let's jump into the predictions this coming weekend. Michigan and Iowa, very intriguing battle. Michigan dominated on both sides of the ball. Maryland last week, they got a dominating home victory in Ann Arbor. They now go on the road to face the Iowa Hawkeyes. Iowa with a very disappointing 41-14 loss in Happy Valley against Penn State. They did not look good coming out of a bye week. Now have to come back home to face the second-ranked Michigan Wolverines in a primetime matchup. Iowa has not played well at home this year. They lost to North Dakota State, they lost to Northwestern, and they also lost to Wisconsin. But I expect the Hawkeyes to be up and ready for this ball game. I expect Desmond King in that secondary to force Wilton Speight to methodically work down the field. I think that Michigan wins this ball game, but I think Iowa's in this ball game from start to finish. I expect Kirk Ferentz to have a solid game plan in place. Iowa's still running for 153 rushing yards on the ground. I expect them to try and get Michigan into a low-scoring, ugly type of ball game at home. I think they can do it. Iowa has the type of offense to really methodically take time off the clock, keep Wilton Speight and that offense off the field, and more importantly, I think their defense can force Michigan to work down the field and get into a low-scoring game. They're still +6 in turnover margin, and Kirk Ferentz is a solid game planner. I expect them to be up for this ball game, and they're fighting for a bowl berth. Iowa's 5-4 overall. They need one more victory to become bowl eligible. I think you're going to see Iowa's best effort. Look for them to rebound in a big way in primetime against the second-ranked Michigan Wolverines. In the end, though, Michigan does get a 10-point victory over the Hawkeyes on Saturday night. Another intriguing battle is LSU and Arkansas. It's an SEC clash. This is LSU's second SEC road game of the year. They did not play against Florida. They play them next week in Baton Rouge. So this is only LSU's second road game. They lost to Alabama 10-0. They gave up over 200 yards rushing on the ground last week to the Alabama Crimson Tide, but held Jalen Hurts in that offense to only 107 passing yards on the through the air last week. Leonard Fournette, a disappointing performance, only 35 rushing yards on the ground. A lot of people expecting an emotional letdown. The last 2 years after LSU played Alabama, they lost to Arkansas. So a lot of people expecting a letdown on the road in Fayetteville, but I don't see it. Ed Orgeron's fighting for the head coaching job, and I think that LSU is an angry football team. They realize that they played Alabama tooth and nail. They played the top team in the country, almost had an opportunity to pull out that victory. Now they go on the road. They face a defense that's given up 198 rushing yards on the ground in Arkansas. You look at LSU's defense, only giving up 118 rushing yards on the ground to opposing offenses, and I think they could force Austin Allen and that Arkansas offense to become one-dimensional. I look for Leonard Fournette, Darius Geis to pound the football between the tackles. I look for Denny Etling to work off a play action, and I expect LSU to rebound and take out their frustration on Arkansas this coming weekend. Arkansas is coming off a 31-10 victory over Florida. This is an emotional team that's on a high, but I think LSU is the much better football team. They get a convincing road victory in Fayetteville this weekend by 14 to 17 points. I think LSU dominates on the road in Fayetteville this coming weekend. Another intriguing battle is in the Big 12, Texas and West Virginia. Texas now has put back-to-back victories over Baylor, and last week on the road in Lubbock against Texas Tech. Dante Foreman and that offense rushed for over 400 yards of total offense on the Red Raiders. They rushed for 414 total yards. 2 weeks ago against Baylor, they rushed for 257 yards on the ground. They have offensive line continuity, and this team overall is gaining momentum. I think when you look at this matchup overall, Texas has the coaching advantage over Dana Holgorsen. I think Charlie Strong has a significant advantage in this ball game over Dana Holgorsen. Don't think he's a good game planner. And more importantly, I like the offensive line of Texas in this matchup. A lot of people feel West Virginia is the better team, but I don't see it. I think Texas playing very well, and they have momentum now. I'm going with the Longhorns. I look for the Longhorns to get a convincing home victory in the area of 13 to 17 points over the West Virginia Mountaineers. I think they could force Skyler Howard into mistakes at home, and I look for the Longhorns to get a convincing home victory, make it 3 straight over the Mountaineers this coming weekend. We're going to stay in the Big 12 with another intriguing battle, Oklahoma State and Texas Tech. I was all over Oklahoma State last week on the road in Manhattan. I thought it was a bad matchup for Kansas State overall going up against Mason Rudolph. They pulled out a solid victory, 43-37, had to make a goal line stand to hold that victory in check, 43-37, but they did it. James Washington, Jalen McCleskey stepped up in that battle, and their defense really played very well in the clutch. When they needed to make plays, they stepped up and made plays. They have owned Texas Tech in recent years. Oklahoma State's won 7 straight games against the Red Raiders. You look at that matchup on the road in Lubbock last year. Oklahoma State won 70-53, but that ball game they trailed in the first half by 17 points. If it wasn't for former quarterback J.W. Walsh, him making plays with his legs that brought the Oklahoma State team back in that ball game. This is a different type of offense with Mason Rudolph. They're only averaging around 146 rushing yards per game, and they're a different type of offense, a pass-heavy first offense. They're not the same type of offense with J.W. Walsh at the quarterback position where they could utilize read option and put a lot of pressure on the edge of opposing defenses. I look at the flip side of this matchup. I look at Patrick Mahomes in that offense. They're averaging 589 total yards per game, and I think they have the playmakers to be in this game from start to finish. It's going to be a shootout. It's a Big 12 game. Expect fireworks. This game is going to go down to the last possession, and I do expect Texas Tech to be in this ball game from start to finish. In the end, though, Oklahoma State pulls out a 7-point victory. But look for Mahomes, who is already thrown for 31 touchdowns this year, to make some noise and keep his team in this ball game from start to finish. Oklahoma State wins a close game by 7 points in this battle. Another intriguing AAC battle is South Florida and Memphis. Memphis has won 3 straight in this battle, but I think really feel that South Florida has the advantage on the offensive and defensive lines on the road in Memphis. Quentin Flowers, Marlon Mack, a solid quarterback running back duo that's running for 274 yards on the ground. Memphis played Temple earlier in the year. They got that victory in the second half, but they struggled for much of that ball game with the physicality of the Temple Owls. They were able to run the football consistently in the first half. They made some adjustments, Memphis did, and pulled out that victory in the second half. But I look at this matchup with Quentin Flowers and Marlon Mack. This is a different type of animal. This is possibly one of the best teams in the AAC. I like the way the Bulls play on the offensive and defensive lines. I think they get a convincing road victory in Memphis. I think they start fast and dominate this matchup by about 20 points on the road against the Tigers in this battle. I think it's a bad matchup for Memphis overall in this ballgame. Another intriguing ACC battle, Clemson and Pittsburgh. Was all over Clemson last week at home in Death Valley as they played Syracuse. A lot of people thought there would be an emotional letdown. I did not see it happening. The one cause of concern that I have for Clemson was that Deshaun Watson got hurt in the first half of that ballgame, did not play in the second half against Syracuse. Didn't matter. Clemson dominated on the defensive side of the ball, won that matchup 54-0 against Syracuse. Thought it was a bad matchup for the Orange. They had some offensive line issues in that battle. And now they stay at home and face another ACC opponent in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has a disappointing secondary that's given up 315 yards per game, and they got coming off a blowout road loss to Miami, 51-28. They now go on the road to face Clemson. Pittsburgh cannot get into a shootout with the Tigers in this ball game because Clemson would dominate this matchup, but they can run the football with James Conner. James Conner in the offense for Pittsburgh, averaging over 200 yards on the ground. I think that's the recipe to allow Pittsburgh to be in this ball game from start to finish. I look at Pittsburgh overall. They're averaging 212 rushing yards on the ground. And I think that they have some playmakers on the offensive side of the ball that can methodically work down the field. I look for Nate Peterman to work off a play action after the running game gets going against Clemson's defensive front seven. That was the difference that Syracuse could not do. They were a one-dimensional offense with Eric Dungey at the quarterback position. Pitt has some balance. They're averaging 37 points per game, but their defense is atrocious. So I look for Pat Narduzzi to slow the tempo down in this ballgame. They cannot get into a shootout. They have lost those type of ball games all year long. They lost to Miami last week the same type of way. They lost to Virginia Tech at home 39-36. They lost to North Carolina the same type of way. They cannot get into a shootout with the Clemson Tigers. More importantly, I have concerns about Deshaun Watson in this ballgame. He's going to play in this matchup, but is he hurt? How hurt is he? That's why I like Pittsburgh in this matchup to keep this ballgame very close. In the end, though, I do feel that Clemson picks up a 14-point victory over Pittsburgh, but I feel like the Panthers are in this game from start to finish this coming weekend. Another intriguing battle is in the SEC. It's Georgia and Auburn. It's the SEC's oldest rivalry game. Very intriguing battle when you think about it. 119 times both of these teams have played. Georgia won last year on the road in the Plains, 20-13, and they're coming off an emotional 27-24 road victory in Lexington. They trailed in the third quarter of that matchup, but their defense stepped up and made plays to give their offense and Jacob Eason put them in a position to pull out that victory. That wasn't an easy victory because Kentucky was fighting for the SEC East first place against Florida. So they were all in that matchup. Mark Stoops had the crew very disciplined and ready, but in the end, Kirby Smart and the defense made plays. You look at the flip side of that battle. Auburn coming off a disappointing victory, home victory over Vanderbilt. I said Vanderbilt would be in that game from start to finish. They were able to get Auburn into a low-scoring game. Sean White did not start that matchup. John Franklin III got the start. He looked very inconsistent in terms of the passing attack. Pettaway, their big play fullback / running back, got hurt at the end of that ball game. How hurt is he? We have to see. But you look at this matchup overall. They've played 119 times, and Georgia did get the victory last year, 20-13. But Georgia's won 4 out of the last 5 by 27 points per game. They've dominated the series. They now come back home after a road victory. They're sitting at 5-4. They're fighting for a bowl berth. I expect Georgia to be in this ball game from start to finish. I think in the end, Georgia does pull out the upset victory over the Auburn Tigers. I think Kirby Smart understands the rivalry of this matchup, and I more importantly like the progression of Jacob Eason over the last couple of weeks. Georgia's defense has only given up 118 rushing yards on the ground. I think they could force Auburn into becoming one-dimensional, force them into third down and long situations, and I look for Georgia's defense to step up and create turnovers between the hedges this weekend. I think for Georgia does win a very high-scoring game, though. I think it's in the area of 34-28. Georgia picks up the home victory over Auburn and knocks out Auburn's hopes of an SEC West title. We're just getting started. Stay with me all season long at GoForThe2.com. College football is the best. Listen to the radio show every Saturday, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Time, SBNationRadio.com or FNTSY.com/radio, Fantasy Sports Radio Network, College Football Game Day. Love talking about college football. Stay with me all season long. GoForThe2.com.